people could arrive, and now I'd like to start. So the webinar today is about the winning strategy for getting a high GRE score. I'm David from examPAL, and with me today is Nancy from Apply.me, and she'll talk later on about how to get the best scholarship that you can. So let's jump right in. And what many people tell themselves and what many people think is that they really, really want to get into 330 Club. And as some of you are divided into two sections, that is the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning. I see some notes. Okay, the verbal and the quant, and both are scaled up to 170. So if the sum of those two together is above 330, you're in the 330 Club. And this is approximately equivalent to the 90th percentile scores. So that's usually where you want to be to get the best scholarships and to get into the best scores, into the best schools. And we'll get into the details in a moment, but it's important to realize that getting the best score, getting into the top 10% isn't about putting in a ton of effort. It's not about being super smart, and it's not about having a ton of knowledge. It's about working right. It's about developing a skill that we're going to talk about today, which is called cognitive flexibility. It's about knowing how to improve quickly, and it's about having a winning plan. So before we jump into the meat of it, I'd like to tell you a little bit about ourselves. Who are we? And so examPAL is a company established by professionals, mainly teachers, with over 20 years of experience in the field. We've collected data from tens of thousands of students from all around the world, and we use machine learning to personalize your learning experience. So one of the things that we found over time is that students have different approaches for learning. So a method that'll work great for one student will work poorly for another student. So it's really, really important for us that every student has the best possible learning experience. And to help do this, we provide 24/7 support through chat from professional tutors like myself. There will be links up later, but you're welcome to open up a free account at our website and just try it out. All of our videos, all of our learning materials are free. And that is also part of our vision. Part of our vision is to share the knowledge with the world. And so, again, we're talking about the 330 Club. We're talking about the top 10 percentiles. And we want to ask ourselves, how do we get there? And the GRE, getting a high score on the GRE, it's not about being smart. It's not about having knowledge. It's about having the right skill set. It's about knowing the do's and the don'ts of how to succeed on the exam. And what it certainly isn't about is tons and tons and tons of repetitive practice. And this is something that some students have difficulty understanding or really appreciating at the start. Because in high school and in college, then usually you're giving a set of exams to solve, a set of homework problems to solve. And if you solve them and if you do all your work properly, eventually you'll get to the exam and you'll do well. This is just wrong for the GRE. It's wrong, and not only is it wrong, it's also exhausting and it's frustrating. And usually people who try to do this just get completely trained. So what do you need to do in order to get to the high score? And the first thing I want to talk about is something called cognitive flexibility. And what is cognitive flexibility? Cognitive flexibility is the ability to find the quickest way to answer a question. And what does that mean? We'll look at a few examples in a minute. But what it means is that when you're given a question, you should be able to, within, say, the first 10 to 20 seconds of just looking at the question, to already develop an intuition for how you want to solve it. There are many, many different ways to solve a question. We'll look at 3 specific methods that we teach later on. And some of them are really slow, some of them are really fast. Usually all of them work. And one of the big issues with the GRE and with standardized tests in general, as most of you probably know, is time. So if you were to have all the time in the world, if you could just take the exam home and solve it at home in your free time, in front of your computer with the internet, I would guarantee that every single one of you would get the maximal score on the exam. And the problem is that this isn't the case. You just have to solve things quickly. So it's not enough to know only how to use equations or only how to guess or only how to look at symmetries or geometries or so on and so forth. You need to know all of the tools. You need to have a really big toolbox. And then you need to be able to select the tool that is right for the problem. This is something that you can learn. This is not something that you are born. This is what we do at examPAL. Specifically, we do this with what we like to call the PALgorithm. And what is the palgorithm? The palgorithm comes from P, A, and L. P stands for precise, and these are methods that you've all seen before in high school. This is essentially taking the question, translating it into equations, going over the equations and solving them precisely. Alternative methods are usually types of guesses. They're all about how you can get to the right answer, even if you have no idea why that answer is correct. And a classic example is by eliminating answers. If, for example, you're asked to find something that has to be in a range, and you know that 3 of your answers are way above the range, and 1 of the answers is way below the range, then you only have 1 answer left. So you know it's the right answer. You don't know why it's the right answer, but all you need to know is that it is the right answer. And these are alternative methods. And logical methods, this is the L of the palgorithm, usually rely on basic properties. And to give an example, if we're talking about number properties, then this could be even and odd numbers. So for example, an even number plus an even number is always even, or the product of an even and an odd number is always even. And using these types of things, you can often find basic symmetries or basic traits of specific questions that allow you to solve them, not guess like with alternative methods, but actually solve them, but without using really complicated equations, without having to write them down in a very formal fashion. And so the big question, and this is the question that you need to ask yourself, and usually what we do during the learning process is we have a lot of pauses, and I'll show you exactly where later on. We have a lot of pauses for you to self-reflect. So a big part of the learning process is that you learn, not that you memorize. It is that you pause after every question you get right or every question you get wrong, and you ask yourself, why did I get this right? Why did I get this wrong? How can I adapt, and how can I learn from my mistakes so that I don't make them again? And over time, as you solve more questions and as you question yourself, you learn to recognize specific characteristics of questions, and you know how to solve each question, and you learn to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses, so you know what method works best for you. And this is shown on our website in a screen like this one. So for example, if you solve a question and you answer it correctly or incorrectly, then after you answer it, we screen through our possible solutions. We tell you how many we found, and based on your profile in our system, we suggest a specific solution that is best for you. And usually it's good to also look at the other solutions, even if you don't want to actually use them, just to see what's out there. And so let's jump in. Let's try our first question. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a little survey. And as mentioned, one of the key things about the GRE, about getting high scores on GRE, is the ability to sort of arrive at a snap judgment of a question, which is how should I approach this question? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the question on the board for, say, 20, maybe 30 seconds. I'm going to let you read it. I'm going to let you think about it for a second. And then I'm going to switch off. I'm going to go to a survey, and I'm going to ask you, how would you solve this question? Would you go about it in a precise manner, which is to say translate it into equations, and then solve the equations explicitly? Would you try and solve it in an alternative manner, which is to say find some way to get straight to the right answer without knowing why that answer is right? Or would you look at some kind of underlying symmetry or some kind of underlying basic number property, which is to say a logical approach? So this is the first question, and I'll give you 20 seconds to read it for yourselves. All right, perfect. So you should have a survey on the screen in front of you. Which do you think is the fastest way to solve this question? If you don't see the survey, please write in chat so I know that you can't see it. You should have a chat on the right side of your screen. How would you go about solving the question that we just looked at? Would you try to translate it into equations? Would you try and sort of guess the answer? Or do you think there's some kind of underlying property that you can use? All right, great. So we have most of the people prefer to go with a precise approach, and a few of you prefer to go with a logical approach. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to show two different approaches to solve this question. So let's start out with the precise approach, which looked like it was the favorite among you. And so the precise approach would be to translate this into equations. So Bill gave Joe X marbles, and since they both started out with 30, that means that Bill had 30 minus X and Joe had 30 plus X. And then Joe gave Bill 3X, and so now we have to add 3X to Bill. So he has 30X, 30 minus X plus 3X, which gives 30 plus 2X. And Joe has 30 plus X minus 3X equals 30 minus 2X. It's a bit of a mouthful. And when doing these equations, you have to be a little bit careful not to make silly mistakes. And then you have to take the difference between them. And if you don't make any mistakes with the minus sign on the way, then you get to 4x. So the difference between them after the second game is 4x marbles, which might be a bit counterintuitive. So some of you might have thought, well, if Bill gave Joe x and then Joe gave Bill 3x, then the difference is 2x. And what this misses is that they both have 2x from the average. So that comes to 4x total. And the precise approach works, which is to say every single question that you will see on the GRE is solvable. These aren't super hard research questions. These are questions that have specific answers, and if you translate them into equations properly, and if you don't make any mistakes on the way, you can solve them. But usually, translating into equations is complicated. We can sort of look at the mess of words that appears here on the screen, and you can look in the middle and you can see 30 minus x plus 3x, and then especially down below, where you might make a mistake carrying the minus, especially if you're under time pressure. And end of the day, what this amounts to is that people who solve this on our question, and similar to the survey here, about 50% of the people on our website solve the question in a precise manner. It took about 1:40 to solve it. Now, just for context, then in the quant section, you have pretty much 1:40 per question on average. So this isn't a very hard question, and yet it still took about 1:40 to solve when translating into equations, just because people get confused along the way. And what I'd like to showcase now is an alternative approach to solve the same question. And it's usually much, much simpler. And so the alternative approach in this case would work by, okay, I mean, we have some x. We don't know what it is. Instead of working with an abstract equation, what we can do is we can translate it into a concrete number, which makes things much, much easier to calculate and much, much easier to feel. So let's say that x equals 1. Then at the start, Bill and Joe both had 30 marbles. Then they transferred 1 marble, meaning Joe had 31 and Bill had 29. After that, they gave back 3 marbles in the other direction. So it's now 32 to 28. And the difference between them is 4. And what should be clear on looking at this is that it's just much, much simpler usually to work with concrete numbers like this one, instead of trying to write in equations. And this works especially well when what you have to deal with is only variables. So in this specific question, our question had variables in it. All of our answer choices had variables in them. And that means that we can choose any specific number for the variable that we like. And let me just pause for a moment to try and explain what I mean. So one of the good things about the GRE and about standardized tests in general is that you know 100% that one of the 5 answers is correct, and you know that it's correct all of the time. So answer D in this case is going to be correct no matter what choice of x I pick. No matter if I take x equals 10, x equals 20, or x equals 30. In this case, I can't go higher, but in other questions, it could be x equals, I don't know, the square root of 2 or pi or some other horrible number. No matter what value of x you pick, in questions like these, you will always have one correct answer. So if that's the case, instead of working with the equations and trying to solve them explicitly, why not just pick an easy value of x, and why not just use it to solve? And this is how it looks. And just to compare, again, students on our website, once they've gone through and once they've realized the use of this method, once they use it, it takes them about half the time. So whereas translating this question into equations and then solving it, or a similar question, could take 1:40, then using a simple method of picking an easy number can shave off half of that time. And that's really important for when you get to harder questions and when you need to think more. Okay, so I want to go on to the next question now. And the next question, we're going to showcase the logical approach for solving. This will also be a quant question. And just to remind you, logical questions are usually about basic properties, logical methods rather. And in this case, the property that we're going to talk about is ratios. So let's read the question. During a 2-day hackathon, 10 programmers consumed $100 worth of pizza. For the same food costs per person per day, what would be the cost of pizza consumed by 7 programmers during a 7-day hackathon? And looking at this at the start, it might be a little bit weird. How do I convert from the 2s to the 7s and the 10s to the 7 and 100? Like nothing here is divisible by 7. It doesn't make sense. And the underlying logic is that ratios can be expanded and reduced. So if instead of a 2-day hackathon, I were to look at a 1-day hackathon, which takes half the time, then I would also need half the money. I would need $50. And if instead of 10 programmers, I had 1 programmer, I would need a tenth of the money again, which means $5. And that means that 1 programmer for 1 day costs $5. And now this question is really easy to solve. All you need to do is take your 7 programmers for 7 days, and then you take the 1 programmer for 1 day, which is $5. You multiply it by 7 twice. In the GRE, you can use a calculator. So if you like, you can use your calculator. Or you can sort of estimate that this is about 7 times 7 is 49. So this is about 5 times 50, which equals about 250. And that is answer choice B. And what I'd like to emphasize here is that we didn't actually have to write anything down as an equation, which is to say there were no x's and there were no y's on the screen. You certainly could have done it. You could have written 10p times 2 equals 100 and then divided and then done a bunch of these things which would essentially be the same as this. But you would have run a much higher risk of getting confused on the way. Okay. And so those were 2 quant questions. And in the 2 quant questions, we showcased 3 different solution methodologies. We showcased 3 different approaches to solve the questions. And again, especially for those of you who came a little bit later into the webinar, what I want to emphasize is that some of you will probably like some approaches more and other approaches less. And this is perfect. This is exactly how it needs to be. What we offer is we do not offer a one-size-fits-all method. What we offer is several different approaches with which to solve problems. And then we let you pick the approach that is best for you. And so now we're going to move on to 2 verbal questions. And in verbal, we still have our different approach types, but they're a little bit different. Usually alternative methods rely almost exclusively on looking at the answers and eliminating answer choices that don't work. For sentence equivalence, and we'll get into that in a second, that means eliminating impossible word choices. Whereas precise and logical approaches rely more on understanding what the underlying sentence means and inferring the correct word choice. So let's see what I mean by that. So let's look at this first sentence. And for those of you not familiar with sentence equivalence, then the way it works is that you're given a sentence that has a blank. You have to pick 2 words from the list such that both words give the same meaning in the given sentence, and create a sentence with the same whole meaning. So in this case, our sentence is, considering recent allegations of impropriety and nepotism, it would have been wise to try to create a more image. However, the executive continued to make his decisions based on personal relationships. And what we're going to do here is we're going to showcase the logical approach. And the logical approach looks like this. It reads our sentence, and it says, well, there are accusations of preferring family, right? That's the first part. Recent allegations of impropriety and nepotism. And then it might be wise to create a more image, which is to say a different image. So if the current image has to do with impropriety, with nepotism, with preferring family, then it makes sense that the new image is a contrast to that, is something different. So we want it to be something which is less biased in making decisions. It's not about family and so on. And then when we look to our answers, we are already aiming for a specific type of answer. We're not just looking at the answers and trying to help them convince us, which is what people sometimes do. I'll explain that more in the next slide. We're looking for a specific type of answer. And in this case, we could jump straight to impartial and disinterested, which is to say, without having gone through all of the answers and paused to think about them and maybe wondered, well, maybe this one is good or that one is good, but that one sounds a little bit good. And this, I mean, it might sound a little bit funny, but it happens to a lot of students that they just get stuck on one specific answer choice that they think sounds amazing. And that ruins the question because you have to get both answer choices right. And so in this case, the logical approach first looks and first aims for a specific target, and then it goes to the answers and looks for that target. And there is another note here, and it's important to know. I don't know how many of you are aware, but the GRE has rather high criteria and high standards for English. So there are going to be a lot of difficult words on the GRE, especially if you're not a native speaker, or especially if you haven't been reading for quite a lot of your life. And one of the skills you need to develop when going for the GRE is how to deal with words that you're not entirely familiar with. And there are all kinds of methods to do this. We go into them more on our website. For example, looking at prefixes and suffixes, or using context, or using connotation. In this specific case, however, I just like to point out that even if we weren't sure what allegations or propriety or nepotism mean, then we could have continued reading the sentence. And the same meaning is actually repeated twice. Because if the executive continued to make his decisions based on personal relationships, and we want to go against that, then that would tell us that the new decision, the new image, should be based not on personal relationships. It should be impartial, it should be disinterested. So even if you find a word that you don't quite understand, usually you can find enough clues in the context in order to infer what it means. And the last question we're going to look at today, I want to showcase the alternative approach. And the reason we want to use the alternative approach for this question, or the reason it's a good choice, is because it might not be 100% clear which word should go into the blank, which is to say, you're not quite sure what to aim for, which is what I emphasized before with the logical approach. So if we read the sentence, successful business leaders strike a balance between and craftiness, then you can probably imagine all kinds of different types of words that would go into the blank. Maybe hardworking, maybe honest, maybe you have many different ideas for words that can go into the blank, and so it's very hard to target a specific word. So instead of looking for a specific word, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the answers, and we're going to look at answers that have word pairs. And I mentioned this before. It's important to remember that in sentence equivalence, you need to pick two answers, such that both of them give the same meaning and the same both to each other and within the context of the sentence. And they don't have to be exact synonyms, but they do have to be similar enough so that they give the same meaning. So in this case, if we go over our list, we can see there's only two possible word pairs. And these are integrity, veracity, which mean honesty or truthfulness, and guile and shrewdness, which are both similar. They're not exact synonyms, but they're very similar to cleverness. As opposed to charisma and naivety, which don't really have any matching word pair in these options. So what we did here is we said, okay, we looked at the sentence. We don't really know what to target, which word should go in the blank. And so instead of doing that, we looked to our answers, and we found that we only have two real pairs. And now we can take these two meanings, we can go back to the sentence, and we can ask which of these two pairs makes the most sense in the context of the sentence. And the key thing to point out and to notice in this sentence is that we need to find a balance between our missing word and craftiness. Now, both guile and shrewdness mean something like cleverness. They're very, very similar to craftiness. It doesn't really make sense to ask for a balance between someone who's being clever and someone who's being crafty, because they're very similar. It does make sense to ask for a balance between someone who's trying to be honest and someone who's trying to be very, very crafty, especially if they're being manipulative. So in this case, our two answers are integrity and veracity. And just to recap, we first looked at the sentence. We realized we didn't know what to target, so we looked at the answers. We found potential word pairs, and then we went back to the sentence, and we asked ourselves which word pair would fit best within the context of the sentence. Okay, so let me go over what we've gone over so far. We've talked about, in general, the need for cognitive flexibility. There are many different ways to approach every single question on the GRE. What you need to do in your preparation is you need to find out the way that works best for you. If you're very much an equation-oriented person, then super, go for it. If you're much more working with the answer and reverse engineering the question, then do that. If you're much more a logical type person, then go ahead and do that. There's no one size fits all, but there is a best fit for you, given the specific question. And just to give a specific example of how this looks like on our website, then this is a question on the website. After you answer it, this is the solution screen. So we show you the specific solution. At the top here it says we'll go for precise because we have such so and so. So we're explaining why we recommend that you choose a specific tool. Again, this is all about recognizing which tool to use when. And then afterwards we have a small insight, which is to say a small note that explains in general when this precise tool should be used. And Moreover, and this slide is to some extent the heart of the algorithm, we ask you for your feedback. So the learning process with examPAL is interactive. If you get a question right, then you're shown a screen which has a bunch of suggested solution tools based on our knowledge. And you should choose which of the solution tools you used, or if you don't like them, you can add your own. If you got the question wrong, then you're given a bunch of different suggested mistake reasons, which we found that students tend to make. And then you choose which mistake you made. And this is how we learn how you work, and this is how we adapt our program to you. Moreover, it is also how you can use the program to learn. And this is something that, even if, for example, you're using a textbook to study with, it's something that you should really master. After you answer a question, especially if you get it wrong, you should pause and you should ask yourself, what did I miss? You should make an error log of all the little things that you've missed along the way. For some people, they'll find that they make a lot of simple calculation errors, and their solution is to just use their sketchpad more clearly. Other people will find that there's always this one rule that they forget, for example, how to use fractions or parallelism or something like that. And for other people, they'll find that they misread the question. They miss a word like positive or negative in the question, and that completely ruins their whole approach. So whatever it is that you tend to make, whichever mistake it is that you tend to make, you should definitely monitor it, manage it, and that is how you will improve. That is how you will get into the desired 300 club. Okay, and the last part of my section of this talk is going to be about the study plan. So far we've talked about the theory, and we've given a little bit of detail and insight into the theory. Now we want to get into actual details. And usually we recommend somewhere between 1.5 months to 2 months of preparation for the GRE, especially if your math skills aren't all that great, or if you're not a native speaker, or if in general your English isn't all that great. On our website, we have about a third of that time, about 40 hours devoted into just learning the material. Our intros teach the basics, and our lessons show how to use the basics to solve various types of questions and also give more advanced topics. And then you have about 30 hours of practice with the algorithm. This is solving questions like we just did now, giving feedback, getting feedback, and from that, learning which types of approaches work best for you. After that, you move on to the practice exams, and here it's really, really important to note that when you're taking a practice exam, you shouldn't just be aiming to gauge your score. So you're not taking a practice exam only to say, oh, great, I'm at 150 or 160 or 165 on my quant section. You're aiming to take the practice test so you can research your mistakes. This is really one of the best opportunities you have to look at official questions released by ETS. So these are as close as possible to the actual test questions. They've been statistically validated by ETS. And you can ask yourself, how is my timing? You can ask yourself, how is my strategy? You can ask yourself, how is my focus? You can ask yourself, are there specific questions, specific topics that I really need to improve at? So when you take a test, you should really use that test to research yourself. And it is really important to note that, again, the GRE has rather high vocabulary standards. So if your vocab's not up there, you'll probably need to work at it quite a bit. Specifically, if we're going to drill down into how you divide this into a 2-month plan, then here on the right, we have an image of the trail on our course website, going through integers, in this case in geometry basics, and then the basics of verbal text completion, and so on and so forth. And all you have to do is follow the trail. It's very convenient. It's very well laid out. Go into each section, do the intro, the lesson, and the practice, and then move on. It should take you somewhere around 2 days per section, about 1 day to learn the material, about another day to solve the questions. And then you should go on and do that as it were. And it's okay if you miss a day here or there. You should definitely take a day off once a week. No one can study 7 days a week, especially not if you're really cramming and going for, say, 6 hours a day or something like that. Take your breaks, you'll need them. And it's also really important that you have a daily reading schedule. And people sometimes underemphasize this. What should you read to practice for the GRE? So easy entries are various popular science magazines, such as National Geographic or Scientific American. You can also go with high-quality newspapers or high-quality novels. We have a list of suggested reading topics on our website. You can go and check that out later on. Once you've done learning all the material, then the last week or so, week and a half before the exam, should be for reviewing the material. And we've gone over this quite a bit already, so I won't talk about it too much now. But it's really, really important that you have what we call an error log. Every mistake you make is an opportunity to learn. But to learn properly, you need to have some kind of memory, some kind of history of what you've done right, what you've done wrong so far. And you can divide your mistakes, and we recommend you divide your mistakes into more or less 3 categories. So professional mistakes are what we call things like not knowing the material. So for example, you forgot a specific rule in geometry or in quant or in verbal or whatever it is. You just didn't know the specific topic well enough, and you need to go and learn that section again. A technical mistake is often just due to sloppiness or working too quickly. So for example, you missed a word in the original question, or you lost a plus or a minus when multiplying or dividing or something like that. A strategic mistake is more interesting. These often have to do with losing focus, or with choosing the wrong approach, or not realizing when you're stuck on a question and when you should skip that question and move on. And all of these types of mistakes are things that real students have encountered, and all of them are things that can be solved, but in order to solve them, you need to have awareness of what they are. And that's pretty much it. So you've learned the material. You know how you need to do it. You need to develop the ability to choose the best tool for yourself for a given question. This is to become cognitively flexible. We've given you a basic plan. You can go on our website. Again, the materials for studying there are freely available. And once you've done all that, and once you've taken a day off to rest before the exam so you're not too tired, and you've had a good breakfast and a good night's sleep, then you're ready to just crush that GRE. And I think that's it for the first half hour of the section. We'll soon switch over to Nancy from Apply.me, and she'll talk a little bit about how to get scholarships and all that type of thing. And later on, we'll come back for a small summary and for a Q&A. And I think that's it for now. So Nancy, moving on to you.
Thank you, David. So hi, everyone. My name's Nancy Ella. I'm with ApplyMe, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about scholarships and how to pay. So good for you guys. Congratulations, because getting a master's degree means that you're going to earn likely 25% more than your bachelor level peers. And it's going to open doors, it's going to expand your career options, and it's going to provide you with advanced skill sets. So, excuse me, my hat is off to you, and I'm thrilled for you. So let's talk about scholarships. Well, there's some tips that we can speak of that's going to help you obtain scholarships. And I have to be honest, scholarships at the graduate level is a lot more challenging than it is at the undergraduate level. And it's the same for financial aid. But there are definitely things that can be done. So you're going to have to work your tail off to obtain these scholarships. You're going to need to write proposals, perform interviews. You're even going to unfortunately suffer tons of rejection from these scholarship applications you submit. But once you've secured it, it's going to help, obviously, reduce the cost of school. So one of the things that you need to know is to read the fine print, because everything there is to know about that particular scholarship will be in that fine print. Is it going to pay? Sorry. Is it going to pay once only? Is it going to be renewable each year? If it's renewable each year, how does that potentially impact financial aid? Does it also require a certain GPA? And other potential pitfalls or things that you have to pay attention to. Something that nobody ever talks about is that sometimes scholarships can not necessarily be tax-free. Some certain scholarships earned can be taxed as ordinary income, particularly at the graduate level. So again, the more you know, the better it is for you. So let's talk some myths, some realities. So some of these myths and realities are, I'm not a great student, I won't get a scholarship. Well, the reality is that you could have a fairly low GPA, and believe it or not, there's going to be plenty of scholarship opportunities because awards can be based on extracurricular activities. It could be rewarded based on ethnic heritage and so forth. How about that scholarships are only awarded to low-income families? Well, that's not true because 38% of students from households with incomes of $100,000 or more qualify and earn scholarships. In fact, 38% of all applicants who apply for scholarships earn them. So you have a reasonably decent chance of getting some scholarship money. Applying for scholarships is going to be a lot of work and it's not worth your time. Well, your first scholarship essay is going to take time. There's no question about it. But you can reuse it for subsequent applications, and as long as you make a few tweaks to meet the specific requirement of that scholarship, you're going to be fine. And you also don't want to overlook the small scholarships. $500 here, $1,000 there, $5,000. Well, when you add it all up, it actually means that that's $5,000 less that you would have to borrow for school and pay back with interest. How about that you missed out on the scholarship season, so you're out of luck? Possibly. Certain scholarships definitely have deadlines, but not all deadlines have passed or are unavailable to you. You're not a top student, so you automatically, if you are a top student, you automatically get scholarship. Well, yes and no. There are plenty of top students out there, so you have to work hard. You have to be very persistent about approaching the scholarship season. Competition for scholarships, it's real, and if you want an award, you're going to have to earn it and work for it. How about the FAFSA? Does everyone remember what that is? The free application for federal student aid? Well, that determines how much you're going to have to pay for college or your out-of-pocket cost of college. Well, schools use that data from your FAFSA to calculate your expected family contribution, or your EFC, which we're going to talk about going forward. And your EFC is the amount the school believes that you're going to be able to afford to pay out of pocket. And it's used to determine the amount of federal need-based financial aid. There's a difference. That has to do with how much the federal government will distribute to you. In graduate school, there are Pell Grants, which is free money, but then there are also subsidized loans, and that tends to be what the FAFSA will distribute. We'll also talk about eligibility on that FAFSA. Only colleges award scholarships, and it's going to potentially hurt your financial aid eligibility. Well, the reality is that there are many types of scholarships out there, and all kinds of corporations and local organizations. Even if you go back to your high school, there's still the possibility that they have local scholarship lists and different ways for you to start identifying scholarship opportunities. You may even want to ask about your own place of business or your parents' place of business to see if there are any scholarship opportunities available. So you're going to need to demonstrate skills. You're going to need to make sure that you understand what actually will happen. Now, in terms of getting scholarships hurting your financial aid eligibility, it doesn't hurt your aid eligibility. It can impact the amount of financial aid a school offers. So before you accept a private scholarship, determine what type of financial aid eligibility you have and how much that particular school may offer. Private scholarships, dollar for dollar, can take away that financial aid that you would get. So if a school offers you a $10,000 merit scholarship and you earn a $10,000 scholarship from Coca-Cola, the school would likely, 99% chance, will take that $10,000 offer that they gave you and substitute the $10,000 you earned from Coca-Cola. Sometimes, and with insight and understanding, you can appeal that and negotiate with the school to keep it in place. I can tell you that we have some inside tricks that we're going to offer to you later on in this presentation. You're going to want to research your scholarship options. To win a scholarship, you have to demonstrate skill. Sometimes showing a skill, as silly as this may sound, if you create a prom dress or a prom costume out of duct tape, you may actually get a scholarship for doing that. As silly as that is, there are oftentimes silly scholarships. But you can win a scholarship, but you have to find them. In our Apply.me, which is affiliated with Scholarship Owl, our platform does a lot of this work for you. And it's going to help you complete scholarship applications for you to submit, not just the applications, also once you've identified and paired up and matched yourself through the profile system, different scholarships that are available, you can rework the essays that have to be submitted with that, and this system, this platform, will help you do that. You're going to want to gather application materials, you're going to want to submit those applications, and you can submit your applications more effectively by narrowing down the options that you qualify for. So you want to answer those optional questions so that they match you with specific scholarships. As silly as that sounds, or as obvious as that sounds, taking that broader approach may make more scholarships available to you, but it becomes much, much more difficult to obtain them because the competition is greater. Using that Coca-Cola example, if it's a $10,000 Coca-Cola scholarship offer, there could be tens of thousands of students applying for it. But if you apply locally or regionally to certain scholarship options, you might have a much stronger chance of obtaining several to equal that one from Coca-Cola, for, again, the example. You also want to make sure that you keep track of different deadlines. The students that we work with sometimes miss out on those application deadlines because they didn't pay attention early enough. They were simply more concerned about the school application than they were about the scholarship applications. And frequently, scholarship applications are due long before regular admission applications are. There are different factors that you have to consider to qualify for a scholarship. So when you look at a range of the different types of scholarships, you want to also look into location, scholarships being offered by the school. Now, when you are looking at scholarships offered by the school, you got to dig deeper than the website. Most scholarships are not listed on a school's website, or if they are, they're deeply buried and you may not be able to find them. So contact the admission and financial aid department for scholarships that may not be listed on that website. You're going to want to take a look, as you can see here, at community groups. If you're a minority, there's going to be minority scholarships that would be listed. So you're going to, again, we talked about this a little bit, but you want to maximize your matches for scholarships when using scholarship search engines by answering the optional questions. If you end up answering too many optional questions, you can dial it back, but this is how you're going to specifically get back to your high school, speak to your parents or grandparents, speak to your employer and the HR department. There's something called the Section 125 plan, which is when a school, when an employer can offer as an employee benefit a $5,250 scholarship or tuition reimbursement to its employee. Your company may offer such a thing. If they don't, you should ask them to do so. It is a benefit to the company, and it is certainly beneficial to you. The benefit to the company is that it's completely deductible. So if they're offering you tuition reimbursement of $5,250, that means they get a full across-the-board deduction. So it's an inexpensive goodwill approach for its employees. As silly as it sounds, you know, just as an idea, contact the yearbook or the class ring publisher if you are a recent college grad or high school grad from in the last 5 to 10 years. There's plenty of scholarships out there. Just you got to know where to look. So let's talk a little bit about financial aid and financial aid applications. You may remember from undergrad, it's called the FAFSA. And the FAFSA determines what your expected family contribution is, your EFC. So in order to determine or to get your financial aid eligibility, there is a formula. The formula is the expected family contribution minus the cost of attendance, and that leaves you with your need. The cost of attendance includes tuition and required fees, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, personal expenses, and so forth. When you get your financial aid offer from the school, you need to evaluate it effectively. So in this example that I identify for you, you have the cost of attendance of $40,000. The EFC that you, through the FAFSA, you got back is $15,000. That's based on income, size of the family, and we'll talk about dependent students and independent students in a moment. The financial aid offer is usually on a year-to-year basis, so you're going to need to refile every year. And in this, again, in this example, you have a $40,000 cost of attendance minus the EFC of $15,000. It leaves you a $25,000 need. In this scenario, the school offered a $10,000 scholarship and $15,000 in graduate student loans. It still leaves you a net price of $30,000. How did I come up with that? Well, you have your EFC that you need to pay. That is the bottom line number. You always will have to pay the EFC. And they left you short by $5,000, and that's why the net price is $30,000. There are other hidden costs that you need to consider in terms of this equation. Some of those costs are health insurance, computer, relocating to the school, if you have children, dependency care. And this is important. Let's talk about this. This is really important, as I said, the FAFSA. You can start submitting the information come October 1st. You need to get what's called your FSA ID. That is your electronic signature. Have your tax returns handy, and don't make mistakes. Mistakes are going to cost you time. Time will cost you money. It will put you back in line at the end of the line once you've gotten the corrections made properly. In terms of dependency status, you have to make sure that this is clear. Everybody's circumstances are different. If you're a dependent student, if you report you and your parents' financial information, you are an independent student if you report only your own information. One of the independent criteria is if you're married or if you have your own dependent children. Although, again, you may think that your parents aren't paying for this, why do they want to know your parent income information? It really depends from school to school. For example, Harvard Law School requires that a student report their parent information all the way up to age 26. In most cases, students attending law school or graduate school, for that matter, parents are not typically paying for the cost of that, but yet schools want to know this information. So you have to be clear, you have to be careful. And this is potentially an area for an appeal with the financial aid office, potentially. The financial aid office is going to offer you a package. If you reside on campus or reside locally, they're going to potentially offer you a work-study program. They're also going to offer you scholarship or grant money. They will also offer federal loans, Stafford loans, Perkins loans, and so forth. So where does the money come from? Well, grants are need-based money. They don't have to be repaid. Scholarships are merit or performance-based, also don't need to be repaid. Work study is need-based campus jobs, usually is earnings that can go towards tuition. It's difficult for that to be the case since you have to work to earn it first, so it could potentially be spending money. It's never going to be a lot of money. It's oftentimes a hair above minimum wage and a minimal amount of hours. They will also offer fixed federal loans, which is low interest rate, and it's going to need to be repaid back, oftentimes within a 10-year period. We're not going to get into a large discussion about loans, but when you finish school, that's usually when they begin having to be repaid back. Oftentimes you can consolidate and stretch out the payment, but you got to be careful. You need to make sure that the degree that you're going for, it measures against the earning powers that you're going to make available to yourself. You don't want to over borrow and then never be able to pay those loans back. Graduate financial aid, graduate money is much lower, smaller pot of money than it is for undergrad. There's about $50 billion worth of federal or graduate degree money. And for undergraduate, it is 5 times the amount. It's about a little more than 5 times. About $275 billion worth of money is available. So a lot less available in the graduate programs, but it's there if you know how to ask for it and you know how to get it. So I shared a lot of really meaty stuff on an overview. Hard to kind of really get everything that you need out of this. So we're going to provide you with a special offer. And I know that you're going to really be thrilled over this offer. It's an offer that we call our graduate student package. It's a discounted bundle. It's a discounted bundle of services that we're providing you with. And this bundle has worked very effectively for currently enrolled college students, currently enrolled graduate students, and adult and non-traditional type students. What you're going to get is all kinds of ways to learn how to get as much money from the school that you're applying to or attending. Understand the key factors to improve your chances of qualifying for scholarships and identifying a number of different ways to craft the scholarship application and your essay to stand out to help you qualify for that. So what is included in our graduate student package is something that we call our financial aid appeals kit. What happened? What just happened? Thank you. So our financial aid appeals kit comes with all kinds of different instructions and insight on how to approach the financial aid office with your own unique circumstances. And we have extraordinary success with the students who actually utilize our appeals kit. You'll also be eligible for 3 coaching sessions from our professionals to bring you through this process. And we're also going to work with you on providing you with some essay assistance. With that, you get 3 sessions with our essay editing staff who are going to help you craft the best possible essay that you can and show you the inside tricks to rework those essays for all the different kinds of scholarships that you're eligible for. So the offer that we're providing you with is only a webinar special. And if you act now, we're actually throwing in a bonus. And the bonus is a list of scholarships for graduate students only. It's really a terrific scholarship list that we've had great success with our students and our people working off of this list. In fact, Benjamin, he utilized this list, he was able to qualify for a $50,000 scholarship, and it allowed him to go to his top choice school. So with that in mind, we feel it's really worth it for you to make a small investment today, and we would be happy to provide you with a guarantee to make sure that you're fully satisfied and happy. And here is what our webinar special looks like. It's close to $1,000 worth of value. The webinar cost, or the website cost, is $850, and with our discount it comes to $679. There will be a link in the chat box, and we're here to answer any questions that you have, and I'm going to hand back the webinar to David. So thanks for your attention today. I really appreciate it. If you have questions, please feel free and ask.
All right, thank you very much, Nick. Find out the special package on the screen. You should have it. It should be there for another minute and a half. So please click on it and use their amazing graduate student package at 20% off. Oops, sorry, you heard me. Let me say that again. Thank you very much, Nancy, for being here from Apply.me and helping explain to us how to get our scholarship. The link to the 20% off the graduate student package, the special webinar discount, is now on your screen. Please click on it and go to their website. It will help you get where you want to go. And I'd just like to wrap up this webinar. I'd like to sort of one last time go over what we've talked over, and then we also have a special package for all of you here with us today. So we started off by talking about the GRE, by saying that it is hard to get into the 300 plus club, but it's definitely learnable. And the most important skill that you need to learn is cognitive flexibility. You need to build up your toolbox. You need to understand which tools you have to approach each question, and which questions are best approached with which tools. Once you do that, and once you go over your mistakes, you make an error log, and you take the time to really try and learn and not just routinely practice, you will get to where you want to go. This is our guarantee, and there is a point guarantee on our website. You're welcome to go and look. And later on, we also talked about the winning study plan, which is basically 1.5 to 2 months of study. And all you really need to do is follow the trail. And it will take you through the sections and through the knowledge that you need to acquire. So our special offer is 30% off on all of the examPAL packages. You'll soon see a link on the top of your screen to all of you here on the webinar with us. Please feel free to click on the link, go to the site. As I mentioned before, you can set up an account on examPAL for free. All of our instructional content, all of our videos, all of our lessons, all of our intros are freely available. But to use the algorithm to really practice with us, you need to register. It has been a pleasure having you here today. I hope you've learned. We have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions on chat before we go. And I think that's it for today. So I'll just wait another minute or so and see if any of the participants want to ask a question on chat. And then we'll wrap this webinar up.